Welcome to the Unboxing the Office podcast, our premiere episode. I'm very excited to introduce this guest to you. I am honored to call this woman my friend. She is a faith-driven podcaster and venture capitalist with a specific focus in the areas of nutrition, genomics, and immunology. Leah Allen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
But first, a word from our sponsors. Coddle Creek Capital, an early-stage life sciences advisory firm and venture fund based on the North Carolina Research Campus. In short, delivering ideas into the world. Innovation, collaboration, and impact. Coddle Creek Capital. One more sponsor, HOTLOGIC, the alternative to the microwave in the corporate break room. No more standing in line at that microwave. Productivity, good health, and happiness. HOTLOGIC, eat happier. Now back to the show. Leah, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Super excited.
Our honor. Nutrition and wellness is something you know a few things about.
A little bit.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., after decades, after a lifetime of work, is walking onto the world stage. At an amazing time in our history. Can you, I hate to start with a question like this, but I can't help myself. Can you give us an overview from your perspective on the state of nutrition and wellness in this country?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we're currently in crisis and growing crisis. I mean, if we could see the trajectory of, in just a generation or two, who's going to be running our nation? Who's going to be teaching our children and driving the buses and, doing our work. I mean, there's really going to be so many sick people. We don't have anybody working. It's now is the time to fix the current crisis that we're in. I can see, how we got there and some other crisis that we evaded. But now we're walking in a new crisis now that we know kind of what these non-food foods are doing to our biology. And now science, it tells us what's good and what's not. And we have got to get to a place where the leadership is putting in regulations to make sure that we have a well people. Yeah, I love what he's doing. And I think it's definitely on time.
You've had your own journey.
Yeah.
I've heard a few things about it.
Yeah.
But I think it would help the audience to understand your perspective if you could fill us in a little bit on the journey you've had in this area.
Yeah. So, I think like everyone else, I was just kind of living my life like, day to day, eating what I was eating, whatever is fast and easy. And, just not realizing what was happening. And I grew up in poverty. And so we were always on the free lunch program or, on food stamps or, things like that. So we were kind of, had to eat what was in the rules of purchasing with those types of things. That was all your options were. And so I think a lifetime of that, caught up with me and a number of other things. But about 2015, I started having grand mal seizures. And Western medicine just really couldn't figure that out. And they ended up giving me a diagnosis of Lyme disease. But, our bodies are created to keep things in check like that. So my immune system, it was just all autoimmune. My immune system was just attacking my body and my organs and everything. And that always, ended up in seizures. So they put me on a 28-month round of antibiotic therapy. And that just made me sicker, and the seizure medications weren't working. And, we just really couldn't figure things out. And I had 4 boys. My youngest was 3 at the time.
Wow.
And it just, obviously that made it very hard. I couldn't work most of the time. There were some days I couldn't read or write. Some days I didn't even know my name. And then other days I was perfectly fine, So after about 6 years of that,
6 years.
Yeah. They found, they said I was in remission, but I was never really completely well. I mean, I just still had tremors. My hands would shake. My head shook all the time. So I was on medicine to try to curb that a little bit so I could just be functioning. But when they said I was no longer in what they were calling remission, and they were going to put me on another 28-month round of this intensive antibiotic therapy, I just decided, and I don't recommend anyone else do it like this, because it's not really the best way. I think everybody should follow their own path and follow their own convictions and ask their own questions. But myself, I just, against medical advice, said I'm not doing it like this. I mean, if this is going to kill me, it's going to kill me, but this medication is going to kill me faster because all my organs, everything was, going bad with it. So I, against medical advice, declined all of that. And I just prayed hard for the Lord to give me some kind of answer. And my reasoning was like, we didn't always have hospitals and medications. And how did people, heal from things like this? Or why are all these new illnesses coming up? And why is it so rampant, And I, through a series of different synchronicities, I found a neurosurgeon in Missouri, Dr. Norm Sheely. And he changed my diet and started treating me with sound therapy, with binaural beats and a pulse electronic magnetic frequency device, a PEMF device. So he started treating me with frequency therapy. He's a Duke grad, Harvard trained, just a great guy, very well educated neurosurgeon, but he didn't like the barbaric nature of neurosurgery. So he spent his life, a career, discovering other ways to fix things. And he just has a whole number of studies that he's done to help people like me with the autoimmune things like that. So within 90 days of doing his therapy, I stopped having seizures. I stopped having my tremors, and I was off all of my medications.
Sound therapy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Binaural beats. It's
6 years.
Deal. Yeah.
A 6-year journey.
Yeah.
And in 90 days.
Yeah. And it was still a year to get to where I was solid, really, really good, but I wasn't having seizures anymore. I've not had a seizure since. So, just following rigorously this protocol that he put me on was.
How has your life changed?
Oh gosh.
Since this is an entirely new direction. I don't know if it was unexpected. Mm-hmm. You were delivered into this, onto this path.
Yeah.
How has your life changed since?
Wow. I call it the gift of desperation. I had the gift of desperation to live for my children. And I then started trying to figure out, how do I help other families? Because my doctors at that point said, we're basically walking you to your grave. You're bedbound. You're not going to get better from here. This is kind of your trajectory moving forward. We don't know what's happening or how to fix it. And that's basically the way we are with all the autoimmune things. And so I went on a deep journey to figure out, how do I get other people well? How do I tell other mothers there are other options out there for you? You don't have to just accept the option of you're going to have seizures or be in a wheelchair or some days not be functioning at all. And there's a better quality of life that we can give you if you find these alternative, they're called alternative measures, but they should be the primary measures, or at least be optional for everyone. And food is medicine. I mean, we are provided everything on this earth necessary, and the human body is just an incredible technology. We are virus killing, cancer killing machines. We are made to be healthy. And given the right environment, without exposure to certain toxins or, certain VOCs or whatever they are, and even with limited exposures and with the right good exposures in place, we can still not be sick, So that just put me on the trajectory to figure out, what do I do? Do I make a healing room? Do I have an office where people come see me? And then it's like, I've got to charge people, then what about the moms who couldn't afford to fly across the country to see me, or fly across the country to see Norm, And it's just not fair we should all be given, the birthright of the quality of life. It's not like I should have to be able to afford my health. That should be something that at the level of leadership, we have regulations that, for example, lead paint. When we realized what lead paint was doing to our biology, it took them, I think it was 20 plus years to actually put in a regulation that said, this is harmful. We cannot use this kind of paint in our homes anymore or anywhere. And so it took us a number of years to, first the regulation was put in so that no longer could we use those for new companies or buildings or homes. But then we had to go backwards and start removing it all because it was so toxic. We've got to find out in regulations, like how do we make the environment healthy so that everybody has the opportunity for that, for health.
This changed the direction of the trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, you have 4 boys.
Yeah.
How did this, what was the
5 boys.
5 boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. What was the impact of this experience on your family?
Oh gosh.
During this time?
Some days it was hard, but with them in school, I was able to just be functioning enough to get them up, and going to school. I was available to them when they were coming home, but it really was such a train wreck and so quick because, for my oldest son, he was 13 when I got really sick, and I was always like the coach of his soccer team and the coach of his baseball team, or at least, the team mom. And I was available for everything at all times. And we did vacations and all those things. And suddenly we were just kind of trapped at home because I wasn't able to travel. I wasn't able to fly for a number of years. I couldn't drive for a long time. So it really impacted the way I was able to be a mother for them. And so, that's a painful part of their history to see mom just go from this lively, energetic mom to, barely getting by. And it was hardest on my oldest son. But, we made it work. I think like any family does, we just kind of worked it through.
I imagine during this time you were working.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the impact it had on your career.
Yeah. Yeah. There were things I wanted to go back to school for. There were a number of plans and dreams that I had, but like everyone else, life kind of hits you in the face sometimes and you got to, make some different decisions. But fortunately, I had worked in the film and entertainment business. So I was able to write a number of scripts so that I could, if I was feeling really, really good at 2:00 in the morning and couldn't sleep, I could work for 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the night. So I was able to make my own hours. I was really blessed with the type of work that I had, because I kind of did contract work, working on different films and things like that. Yeah.
Has this new direction influenced the path that you've taken?
Oh gosh, so much. We ended up buying a genetics lab, and that was really exciting because, it was an existing lab and an existing team, and the team of scientists came with it. But and they're a fabulous team. I mean, these guys are just, they really think outside the box. They're brilliant. And we've got some really neat projects that we work on, but I'm also able to guide some of these studies and projects through our labs uniquely where, I don't have to convince somebody that I'm maybe onto something or, let's just try to validate what's already been proven. Yeah.
But of course, as you suggested, even though you were working with doctors, medical technicians, researchers, a lot of this is still today described as alternative medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you able to work in these areas under the purview of the current, I'll say, you have FDA, you have NIH, you have an entire empire of regulatory agencies
mm-hmm.
that are, of course, intended to control
mm-hmm.
the direction of this development, of this medical research. How are you able to operate within the confines of that system?
It's really interesting because initially it was a lot harder. I mean, we're a few years in, and the things that have gone, the way of thinking, even for the scientists and the doctors and, some politicians who are really catching on. I think the mayor of New York City had put in like a $50 million budget for all of the doctors to go back to school to learn about food as medicine, to offer that as at least an alternative option to medications, or as maybe a first and try this first. There's a real place for Western medicine with crisis. There's a real place for that, but we've got to bridge the gap over to a holistic preventative way. And that is good for the budget. We've got an unsustainable budget right now. And in a generation or two or less, we cannot afford to the surgeries and the medications that are required for daily living, life-saving medications. Whereas if we were in a preventative model, we wouldn't be spending as much money going out. And when you have a healthy people, you have a wealthy people, because you have people with the energy and the creativity to create new things, or to go to work for other people to help them create their things. And, they've got the energy to do that daily. Whereas, when they're on medication and they're dragging along and they're barely getting by, and in some cases end up unemployed because of their medical condition, it's not sustainable the way that it's currently is. So we've got to really shift some of those dollars. And I think that goes into the university systems too, with the way we fund the universities. We've got so much research and so many amazing findings every year, or that are on the shelves from 20, 30, 40 years of research. And it's left up to the private corporations and the private venture capital companies to take the risk to go in and find these things, and then to create a commercial product out of that. Because if you've done the research, for someone, first of all, it being on the shelf of the university, it's of no help to humanity. But even if you wrote a book or had a conference or told people about it, what benefit is that to them if there's no modality or technology for them to access the benefit of whatever it be, light therapy, sound therapy, food as medicine, if it's organic foods, and things like that. So we've got to be able to not only fund the research and fund the facilities, but we also need to fund the innovation and the commercialization, not for capital gain, but for access and affordability, because we have to create a commercial product or some kind of means for everyone to access that, whatever that research finding was.
Well, insert gratuitous plug here. How does Coddle Creek Capital play in that space?
We're early stage. We've been blessed with great partners who have a mindset for humanity, and who want to see their children and their children's children be able to live in a world of health and joy, because this is a wonderful experience here on this planet. And if we just shifted a few things, we could create a better human experience for everyone. And it wouldn't take very long, if things were done right and in whole, because some of these things are already in place, but they're segregated apart from one another. Mm-hmm. If you did all of this as a whole and did it correctly and all at once, 3 to 5 years, we would see such a significant shift. I mean, if you gave me one school, and we get into their cafeteria food, but we also change their lighting, we change their water, we change the quality of air that they're breathing, and maybe the colors they're exposed to. We plant gardens and orchards, and the things that we're feeding them. And the clinical research, if we put a clinical research team around that, the socioeconomic impact goes far beyond just health. It goes to aggression. It goes to their IQ. It goes to their ability to retain information, their ability to sit and receive the information. And I mean, there's so many things, but, if we even measured the police departments, or, how many school shootings were there in that area after these things happened? Or how many times did little Sally go for her insulin, if at all anymore, just after changing her diet at school? Not to mention what she's eating at home or on the weekends. Because I think it's the Dean Ornish data that says if it's 60 to 80% vegan or vegetarian and organic, it's kind of the same as if you were covered at 100%. Your biology is going to do well. And so to have those little lax points, if they're not eating well at home or on the weekends, what we're feeding them at school and breakfast and lunch is sufficient for their health.
You've been working on developing some studies in this area.
Yeah.
Community development and schools and such. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, again, with my initial dream of like, do I open a healthcare facility and do I charge people for that? And how do I reach the masses? How do I get into every single home? And it came, and then I was going to open a cafe and all organic and do a franchise model. And then, there were all these ideas and dreams over the last 5 years that I've really been dreaming it out and praying it up. And what I realized is if we got to the masses in the cafeterias, and that's in the elementary schools, in the daycares, in the middle schools, high schools, and the universities, and also in the incarceration facilities. I mean, just change their cafeteria exposures, just that piece alone, and make it more of a restoration, a health restoration facility. You're healing people just with food and with their water and with different exposures. And the science is plenty. The data is there. If there's someone who goes, well, that's Pollyanna thinking, let's just really think about the data that's already available.
Is there acceptance in the current school systems for these sort of programs, or at least at the state level?
There's plenty of acceptance. And I have not talked to one politician or one teacher, one leader, anyone who on either side, red or blue, and no matter what their beliefs are, that doesn't see this as a benefit to our health, to the future of our health and our nation, but also to the budget, to the nation's budget. Again, healthy people are wealthy people. And it really, really shifts some things just by shifting a few key number of things. And again, in the schools and the cafeterias, I mean, the teachers are all for it, but who's going to invest in that up front? Because organic food is so unreachable. I mean, what is it, like the top 3% who can afford, organic food, and everyone else has to eat the pesticides and everything else that's just given to them that's affordable? That's not right.
Right.
And to me, that's a crime against humanity as far as I'm concerned, because you cannot poison your people and know what the biological outcome is and say it's up to them to educate themselves and to purchase it differently. Well, what about some young mom who just was not exposed to the information? That's not right. And she wouldn't be aware of it until she has the gift of desperation. Either herself, she gets sick, or one of her children gets sick. And now she's on a journey to heal her home and then to heal everyone else, because she will find that the data is there and the data is plenty, and the alternative measures, which should be our primary measures, are available.
I'm as big an RFK Jr. fan as anyone. I've said for a long time I'm a Kennedy Democrat, and that's why. But I'm very happy that he's having a chance. He's having his turn at bat, but he's got a lot on his plate.
Yeah.
Is this something, do you think, that he'll have time to get into?
Oh, gosh, yes. And he's doing it right. He's doing it bold. When he was running for president, I mean, we can get into politics, and I might have a lot of people hate me after that, if they have their own views, but I'm okay with that. My own truth is my own truth. And interestingly, I was writing a movie. I still do some of my writing with my film team. And I feel like, the film industry, TV, and our social media is such a great way to get good messages out there. I mean, there's the good and bad and the ugly to every technology, to everything. But there's if we could get some great messages in front of people, it can really change the mindset, just in a movie or in a series. So I was working on a movie where a gentleman by the name of Royal Lee did organic foods and things like that. So there's a big story behind that. But interestingly, the way God works is just beautiful and unique. And if our eyes could see those paths in family lines and things like that, we could see that, and we are so powerful, and we have the help of all of heaven that we allow and that we ask for, and it's available to us. It will not intervene or interfere, but if you ask for it, you'll get the answers and the pathway to what you're looking for. And I think it's unique that in that family line, JFK wanted to prevent these things. And RFK Jr. is here, cleaning it up. And I think what a beautiful end to the story, of this movie that I was already writing. It's kind of writing itself.
Or the end of the beginning.
Yeah, definitely the end of what we're looking at. And we don't have to go any further into this crisis, and the beginning of something new and beautiful. And, I don't think he has all the answers, and he has all of, the things he wants to change. Autism is a big thing.
Yeah.
The vaccines are a big thing, and it's very controversial, but he's right in his thinking. And, but he doesn't have the resolution to the pathway in all of the areas. And, uniquely myself and a team of people that I've been working with and a friend of mine that I've consulted with for a long time, just in the way our build systems, the way we're doing housing, the way we need to remediate our soil, the way we need to do organic farming, we need to have gardens in all the schools and orchards. We need to be teaching children how to harvest, how to cook, all those things so they can do it in their own home for the prevention of these things. And then it can be their own option if they choose what should be alternative measures, the whatever else they want to do.
So you mentioned organic food.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned soil.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the way all that works to understand, but I think you know a few things about it. Mm. How important is the quality of soil to the food that we produce?
Well, it's incredibly important, and
it's dirt.
Yeah.
It's just dirt, right?
It's definitely the difference in health and wellness. It's the difference in the vitality of the fruit or the vegetable, the grain itself, and the quality of nutrition in that. There's a really great group, Standard Process, that has farms in Wisconsin, and they do all organic meal bars, and they do nutritional supplements for holistic physicians initially, but anyone, who wants to get into that, it's available to them. But they uniquely measure the polyphenols in each of the fruits and the vegetables. And, the polyphenols is how much exposure it's had to the sun, the color that it's absorbing from the spectrum of the sun, and, the blueberry and, the strawberry and the colors and the things and the nutrition that's stacked in that. I think it was like 40 years ago, what 1 cup of spinach gave us the nutrition for, it takes us over 20 cups of spinach to get the exact same nutrition. And that's because of the soil is so depleted, and the way that we grow and force grow our fruits and our vegetables doesn't allow for the exposure to the sun long enough to allow for that nutrition to be jam-packed into that leafy green or into that succulent fruit for you to take into your body. And just like medicine, those things are measurable, and we require, our biology is a technology. It's just like your car. If you don't put enough gas and the right kind of gas in your car, it's not going to run properly.
But wait, an apple is not an apple?
An apple is not just an apple.
I don't understand how that.
Yeah, it's very technical, and the science team could give you all the big words on it all, but really the exposure to the sun and the way that we grow those things without pesticides, without force growing our foods. I mean, literally the story of Cain and Abel, when Cain, to bring, history into it, it's not even religion, it's history, but Cain forced the grain from the land and it didn't have the nutrition. And so it wasn't even necessarily, a punishment. I'm rejecting you, you heathen, because of this, you didn't bring me the best and I deserve the best. I am God. It wasn't, it was, doesn't have the nutrition level that's required for the biology of my people. So I have to reject you from feeding that to your family and the people, because their bellies will be full, but their brains and their body will eventually get sick because they don't have the proper amount scientifically. That was the message of the religions and of the great teachers, was the message of the science of the biology and the exposures to the foods and to the water, to right thinking, right living, and right exposures.
I know a lot of toddlers are going to be upset.
Yeah.
They're not just taking 1 helping of spinach.
Yeah.
Now they got to have 20.
Cups. But if we grow it right, those things are measurable. And
is that possible?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, certainly.
Now we do factory farms,
Yeah.
1,000 acres at a time.
And that's okay. We can even do that appropriately. We have all the right facilities in place. If we just change a few things, the people who are doing the pesticides and force growing our stuff, those are the people we want to be we don't want to put them out of business. And we don't want to, protest them, so to speak. We want to bring the right information to them and expose them to, you can still make a lot of money and as much money and maybe more money on these ways and the right ways. And then people are going to benefit from that. So we can still do mass farms, but we need to have organic soil. I mean, dandelions, for example, we can, dandelions are very deep rooted and they grow in all directions and it pulls all the metals and all the bacteria and things from the soil. And then if you cut the bloom and char it, and then the char creates these microtubules that are unique now to that soil. So when you spread that char back out into that field, it amplifies and speeds up the replenishing of that soil. And so there are so many organic ways that we can replenish our soil, and we can grow organic crops. I mean, there are plenty of farms that are close enough to organic that we could do a slow rollout of this. But I mean, in the days of the Dust Bowl, we had depleted our soil so badly, which is why we ended up starting making non-food foods to feed our country.
No, non-food foods.
Non-food foods.
What's a non-food food?
These are frankenfoods. I mean, you make these foods that taste like food. They make the brain think that it's full. It tricks all the same receptors that say my belly is full and I'm good, but there is no nutrition in these things. And so,
is this happening?
This is happening. Well, we're generations into this now. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the science and the data around what we did to avert famine. I mean, think about the days of Egypt. Our leaders were looking at our soil going, nothing is growing. And now everybody was pushing out to California to, the orchards out there because that was the last of the work. But the farmers didn't, the soil was so depleted, we couldn't grow food in it. And so we had to revive it with, an old Sumerian way. These were ancient old ways of farming, the mounds and the curves and things like that. So we were able to salvage that enough. But what we did was create another crisis because, creating these non-food foods or these fast foods and the microwave foods and the radiation and the exposures and things like that created a whole nother crisis that was generations coming. And now we're smack in the middle of it.
Well, as my audience knows, you can't mention the word microwave without getting me excited.
There's your plug-in.
But I mean, a microwave is going to heat the food. Does it really have an impact? Can a microwave really impact the nutrition of food? Is that a thing?
Well, I mean, there's a whole science around immediately when, the radiation, the microwave, I mean, it's just boiling water in the microwave, certainly. And then the cells in your body are now going to be reverberating at this,
I'm talking to a woman who was healed by sound. I should probably already know the answer.
Yeah.
But are there studies that document this?
Absolutely. There's plenty of data that documents what microwave foods, not only the microwave foods, but to microwave an organic food. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the radiation in the cells now of that good food, now you're putting into your body. And so, the data is there. It's not so plentiful as some of the other data, but it's enough. If you researched it, you find that that's not well. I mean, small exposures is not such a big deal, but it's not something you want to do 3 meals a day or even every day.
So I don't want to get us too far off track. Okay, soil is restoring the soil on RFK Jr.'s list.
Yeah.
Is this?
Well, it's not necessarily, I don't know that it's on his list. I don't know what his list looks like. I'd love to see his list because I could really.
He might not want to show people his list.
I'd be one that I'd love to look at that list and see if I've got resolution to some of the things he wants to fix, because these things are probably a lot more accessible and affordable to the nation than what he thinks if it's done right. And if you get the right team, think about a think tank team, people have been thinking about these things for decades. You get a 4 or 5 people in the room that have already been doing the research. They've got, each one has a different resolution to a different crisis. And you can really change the trajectory of the human experience and humanity itself.
But I got to push back a little.
Yeah.
Because talking about think tanks, the world's most brilliant minds and the world's greatest universities have delivered us to this point in time.
Yeah.
Where we have non-food food.
Yeah.
And that's a thing.
Well, that's a problem.
How'd that happen?
Well, that's a problem. And, I think that goes to, again, the funding with the university systems. If you look at what the funding goes to, the funding with the universities goes to funding the research, which is a good thing because we can change humanity. But again, it's left up to the private investment groups to come in and say, oh, I like that research. I want to make something available to humanity to change the world with that. And then, the rest of the money, a portion of the money and the funding goes to the buildings. Another portion of the money goes to the tenured professors and things because, you got to keep the kids educated. We've got to have a percentage and a large percentage, but not a huge percentage, but significant enough where within the university systems, they are required to develop also the innovation that comes from that research. Because if you don't apply it, if there's no applicability, if there's no innovation around the research, it sits on the shelves for decades.
Yeah.
And what good did it do, our research funding, our government funding, what did it do for the nation to fund the research and then not make it applicable to the masses?
Does that model even exist?
The model absolutely exists. It's interesting. The buildings that we're in currently in Kannapolis, North Carolina, we're at the North Carolina Research Campus. And Mr. David Murdoch had a unique vision 20 years ago. And he just was a brilliant man. And not anyone has been able to really catch the vision to its fullest fruition. But what he did was he built 2 buildings that currently house every university of North Carolina, researchers, PhDs, all that. And they've got a number of labs and doing a number of, fabulous research. And he brought the brightest minds from all over the world, moved them to North Carolina to ensure that we had the brightest minds right there on campus. And they've been there for 20 years. And then the building that we're in, that our labs are housed in, I believe was intended to be the innovation building. And so the way that it was intended to be, we've got all the research coming from the 2 other buildings, but then we need commercial products to come out of these other buildings so that it can be accessible initially. And initially anything that's accessible is not affordable, because, it's just that's just the way startup cost for anything, right? But we have to make it accessible first in order to make it affordable. And then once we make it affordable and then philanthropic means can make it accessible to everyone. So the innovation is critically necessary to the research because the research is nothing in a book on a shelf collecting dust.
Okay, so you've made a couple references to Bible passages, right? And I actually, in your intro, I mentioned you are a faith-driven podcaster and investor. What does that mean to you?
Oh, I think, what we call religion and was really just, it really is the science of our biology. It's a message of how to, if you do these things, it will be well for you. And there are so many great stories in humanity and in our history. For example, the story of Egypt. Everybody's familiar with the Pharaoh that had the dream of the fattened cow and the emaciated cows. And then, Joseph came up and was able to interpret the dream. Well, why was Joseph able to interpret the dream? Joseph was, he understood right thinking. He never swayed or wavered from what we call the God we serve, our creator, divine source. We all know that there's something that created us and that we just don't understand fully. But in every generation, there are those who have dedicated themselves to salvaging communication with creator, with source, with God. Call let's call it what you want. But I call it God and my creator. And we are co-creators with this incredible creator. And we are endowed with the power to ask on behalf of ourselves and others and to receive that information. And the message of Yeshua, the message of other great teachers was to eat well. And it was, the communion room. How do you live among your brethren? How do you live all 7 days of the week? Don't just eat this way on one day or during a certain feast. Eat this way all the time, and it will be well for your biology. And interestingly, we have the pineal gland and our pituitary gland. And, our pineal gland is a receptor, and, it's got the piezoelectric quality of receiving and transmitting. And if you think about our television that receives an image, your brain receives an image, and you can picture what your kitchen at home looks like right now. I just said it and you just pictured it.
Yes.
And that's just the technology of the human body and the human brain. Well, part of that is communication. And in all of our sacred literature and all of our history, there are great men and women who had talks with what they call the angel of the Lord, or, whatever we call that, but people or beings or intelligences beyond our dimension that we can't see or touch or feel otherwise. But if we are salvaging or living correctly, our minds are more tuned to that frequency. And so then prayer is very different, because like Joseph prayed and he received the answer. He knew, he had the dream. He knew God told him, the angel of the Lord told him what the answer to that was. And that was on behalf of the nation, because crisis was coming. And he didn't just store up grains in a storehouse, which is the way our storyline goes. He restored the water systems. He restored the soil. He restored the planting and the organics of that. And he fed the masses with food as medicine, so they could eliminate viruses and bacteria, so they could eliminate famine and all of the things that were coming because of the way they were growing the food, because of the way they had depleted the springs and the water and things of that nature, the way that they were behaving among one another, their thought processes, the way they were, whatever it was, that's not well for your own biology, and it's not well in community. So he fixed a lot more than storing grain for 7 years. There was nothing stored up. It was, he replenished the soil first. He replenished the growth systems and the water.
It's almost like they were providing us a template. So when you were growing up, did you have faith in your family? I mean, were you raised in a home that practiced faith?
Not so primarily. My mother and father did. My grandparents did. I wasn't exposed to them very much, but I had a unique experience. When I was 18 months old, I would cry for the church bus. Like all the rest of the days a week, the school bus would go by, my sister would get on the bus, and I didn't care. I wasn't crying for the kids or the bus. But when the church bus drove by, I would cry inconsolably for the church bus, 18 months old, And so one day, the family I grew up with, my mom was just, she took her 18-month-old out to the bus and stops the bus. She's like, take her and bring her back. And, just gives me over to the school bus.
You could do that back then.
You could do that back then. And the choir leader lady who was the assistant on the bus, she took me to my class, and she'd bring me back from my class, put me back on the bus and take me home. And so that's how I started going to church. And, I've always had this deep love for Yeshua and for the message of Yeshua and for people. And I could see that in everyone, no matter how bad the person behaved. I was always like, I can see the good in you. I need to show you the good in you, because when you see it, you'll be it. And so it's kind of been it's been a fault in many ways. And, but it's just been kind of a unique experience. I didn't have like a coming to Jesus moment like maybe some other people have. I guess that was it. I was born in love with God.
As you've suggested, our bodies do communicate with us
Mm-hmm.
was your body, even at 18 months,
Mm-hmm.
at 18 months old, your body was telling you you needed faith.
Yeah. Yeah, that there was definitely something beyond us. I think children have a unique view into realms that, by about age 7, they stop being able to see their angels and communicate with their angels. And I think that's not good, because we should be encouraging them that those things are real and safe and well for you. And we should continue to communicate with our angels. And as adults, we should learn like the children do. And I think that's an interesting message. Yeshua said, had faith like children. The children, they weren't scared of things. And yeah, it's interesting. I just knew that there was something beyond what was here.
I imagine in the same way, our bodies would communicate if we need. I've had friends who have told me, I needed B12. I just didn't know I needed B12.
Yeah.
My body was telling me I needed B12.
Yeah.
Does the same principle apply to nutrition?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When a mother is pregnant, her body tells her if she needs eggs or if she needs red meat
or chocolate,
or chocolate, but I mean, hey, the chocolate, the cocoa bean is so good for the brain health, and it's great. It's a great in moderation.
Baby needs chocolate.
Baby needs chocolate. Mama needs chocolate. But yeah, we do have communication for our health and our wellness too. And our bodies will tell us what we need. Certainly, when you crave something, it's generally when you have a deficiency there, and you need that. Yeah.
So we have non-food food.
Yeah.
And we're all filling our bellies,
Mm-hmm.
right? But at the same time, we're starving.
Absolutely.
And our bodies are screaming
Mm-hmm.
that this is not food.
That's right.
And we are starving.
Yeah.
We have a nation of starving people.
Mm-hmm.
Does that affect mental health?
Incredibly. Oh gosh, our food is everything to do. Our gut health has everything to do with our brain health. Everything is so interconnected. I mean, it's interesting the way we have our medical system, because everything is so segregated. If you go to the heart doctor, you get medication for this, and then your kidneys blow out, and then you got a nephrologist, and then this blows out, and then your brain health and your gut health, and it goes on and on and on.
Wait, are these things connected?
Oh goodness.
What?
It's just so wild that we don't see that as a science already. And again, the ancients knew that, and there is a template there. There are peace cultures who grew their food in a certain way. They had certain water that they were exposed to daily. Those things were rules at the level of the nation. They weren't religious, spiritual rituals. They were what we needed to do daily to tend to our biology. And they knew that without having the technology that we have. And what a shame that we have the technology to validate all these things, and we're screaming it from the rooftops. But at the level of our leadership, we just say, well, it's up to you to figure out what you need to buy from the food shelf. It shouldn't be available on the shelf if it's going to make your people sick, because if it makes your people sick, what happens? The nation has to now pay for the unemployment and for the medical bills, because the person can't work now. So wouldn't it be wise for a nation's leadership to put in regulation that we don't want to put these people out of business. We don't want to make bad guys or enemies out of anyone. We want to educate them on better practices. And when we educate them on better practices, we need to give them resolution to change those things. And once we bring the demand, it brings the affordability. And so, it all works. It's a full circle. We don't have a full circle economy. There are certain people in leadership in communities like Port Townsend, for example, Washington, who are very excited about full circle economy. And they are really putting initiatives together to ensure that they become a template for a full circle economy. And the way that, we're creating an education system, education and research, to try to educate people on full circle economy. There should be full circle education that allows for the education of full circle economy. And when you get leadership at the level of even just communities, it doesn't have to be all the way to the White House, but eventually it'll reach there, because we become the prototype communities of the right way to build, an efficient way to build, a less of a carbon footprint. We have got to realize the biology of our planet as well. and we've got to heal that. It is fixable. It is doable. We're late in the game to fix it. And again, it's not making enemies out of anyone. The earth provides us with resources that are beneficial to our technologies in moderation, but we've got to do it well. And then we have to let the earth replenish. And we have to do things that are not so harsh on the biology of the planet as well, because the planet is here to heal us and to keep us living. We don't need to go to Mars and create a whole new ecosystem. I mean, I can tell Elon the perfect city. I've got the template for the plants on Mars, because if you created the dome, and
wait a second, someone call Elon. We have the answer.
We've got the answer to the city on Mars. But here's the thing. We're already here. We've already got the dome, the atmosphere. This whole planet is that. And so simultaneously, we should be exploring things of that nature. Other civilizations have done that. We can do that again. We can do it in a healthy and safe way. And I think it would be beneficial to the evolution of humanity. But we can implement those exact same things measurable here, because if I sent them to a dome on Mars, I cannot, if I would say they cannot have polyesters in their clothing. They cannot absorb certain things in their skin. We would have to measure the polyphenols, measure every single thing like medication, every food that goes in their mouth. There's a minimal and a maximum requirement for each thing for the biology and for the health of the body. If you need for it to be sustainable and self-sustaining in this little dome that you create on Mars, we can do the same thing here. And we've already got the plants and the trees and the vegetation. We've already got the technology. We can simultaneously fix it here. And with these prototype communities, as we build better, as we feed better, as we have better exposures and less toxic exposures, we become the prototype cities, the little prototype communities that validate these things. And they can send their own clinical research teams to validate these things. And the socioeconomic impact, again, it goes far beyond the health of the body.
So what I heard from that is no polyester.
Well,
what's going on with polyester?
It's a whole nother issue. I mean, everything I'm wearing is polyester. And,
okay.
I in trying to heal myself, I was trying to really get rid of every toxic exposure I had. And when I learned from Norm, was part of this exposure was our clothes. And our clothes are made from polyester. So our skin is the largest organ of our body.
Yeah.
So we're in your bloodstream and in my bloodstream, we can measure these things that I'm absorbing into my bloodstream, these toxic things from our detergents to our soaps, to our shampoos and all those things. And so polyester is a big deal. We created a company called West Eden Apparel, and we are attempting to educate, so I first try to educate clothing companies or parents or people or whatever. But then when you go, where is it affordable and accessible to do it otherwise? Where can I buy organic clothing? Now, mind you, I had 5 kids.
Organic clothing
with organic cottons. It's not sufficient to just have 100% cotton. It's got to be organic cotton or organic hemp, and the blends of the right fabrics, linen, or silks and things of that nature. But those are measurable. The frequencies of those things are measurable too. We are a frequency machine. Yeah. It takes electricity in my body. They have to jumpstart me with an electric machine if my body stops running properly.
Right.
They've got to put the electrical charge back into my body. We are frequency generating machines. And again, now that's no longer just myth. That is validated, measurable fact. And so we've also got plentiful data that says that the frequencies that certain fabrics and certain blends of fabrics impact your brain capacity and impact your ability to think and communicate, your agitation levels and all that differently. And so the frequency of the material of our fabric, again, the ancients knew this. They had a certain blend for a certain thing. And so if you wanted a blend, a very unique blend of, cotton to whatever it is, for the frequency and the mind capacity, again, it goes to our prayers. Prayers were asking something that is well for me or well for my family or well for my community and expecting an answer. And so we went to the priests. What were the priests? They just made it their life choice and their career to wear certain fabrics, live in a certain way, think a certain way, and eat certain foods and do certain rituals that were right for their biology so they could stay on the frequency level of not only giving a request, but also receiving it on behalf of everyone. And so they would come to them to say, hey, I'm not hearing from God, or from Creator, or the answers for my family. My daughter is sick, or my whatever it is. Can you ask the questions and come do this for me? And it might have been that they had the answer to give a certain food or be given the frequency for the laying on of hands. We're a healing technology of ourselves that cannot be surpassed. It could be matched eventually, but the laying on of hands cannot be matched. And again, cannot be surpassed. But again, that used to be myth, right? That was just religion. This is scientific fact. We know that a prayer can unravel a DNA strand. We measure that. That's data. Research it. It's not myth. So
Wow.
Your minds are powerful. Your thoughts are powerful. It doesn't even have to be a prayer with your word. Every thought is a prayer. Every thought is a frequency. So what am I thinking every single day? If it says pray without ceasing, I'm praying without ceasing without even knowing it. Am I praying to bad or am I praying to good? And it's every single thought is a frequency pattern that is reverberating through my molecules all day long.
We are spiritual beings.
We are spiritual beings.
So we've talked about the soil.
Yeah.
We've talked about the cafeteria.
Yeah.
We've talked about our clothing.
Yeah.
The toxic soup that RFK Jr. talks about.
Mm.
What about our homes?
Oh, goodness.
How do we bring sustainable living home, affordable living home?
Well, initially we need to educate the builders because what we do is the cheapest, fastest route to make the most money. And look, I got to feed my kids too. I got to make money, so I get it.
Is it the cheapest, fastest route? Because these homes are $200,000, $500,000, $1 million now. It seems that the trajectory goes straight up.
It is.
That's not cheap.
It's not cheap. We're developing another company. Again, what I always first try to do is educate people in the industry. And people listen and they're excited about it. They don't know how to implement it. They're just like, well, how do I change it? Or how do I do this? And so after I've educated enough people or talked to enough politicians that are super excited about the data, and they again, not one of them, after looking at the data, we can have our debates all day long. I can have my skeptics all day long. But if you review the information, review the data that's already available to you, then come back to the table and we can have an informed discussion about what it is. Initially, we have our opinions that are uninformed. But once we've become informed and see the data, it's indisputable at that point. You cannot dispute the data. Now we need to come to the table and say, how do we implement these things? So with the housing, I've tried to educate a number of people who are in land development and who are creating housing communities. And there are a number of people who've put up communities in a way that was more affordable, more sustainable, and more energy efficient. But again, it's not sufficient done without all the key factors. But it's good. We're on the right path. So what we're developing now is a company that builds houses with a 3D printer.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah,
That's
so we can build from the earth more affordably. We require less trucks and less of the teams. So it's less of a carbon footprint. And right now, with the housing crisis that we're already in, which is not affordable, not sustainable, and the building, now we've got a lot of our workers that aren't available because of other crises that we're reaching that, is just for whatever side of politics you're on, there is a crisis happening. So we don't have as many workers as we did have. So and the current build system is too slow. And again, it's not affordable. We've got to truck in all of the supplies and it requires so many people and so many workers and so much time.
Is there an answer to
There is
this?
absolutely an answer right now. And it's again, affordable, sustainable, but it's also eliminating the toxic exposures to the paints, to the VOCs in our carpets, to the VOCs in our materials that we're using for our furniture, the sheetrock. We measure these things and then we put it in regulation. We can't use the popcorn ceilings anymore. We can't use the lead paint anymore. Eventually, we'll get to the point where we've eliminated all the toxins, and moving forward, we shouldn't allow any new communities to go up that allow for the toxic exposures. And we should gradually, over a number of 5, 7, 10 years, start reversing the current toxic exposures that are in our homes that are keeping people sick. And again, it's just, the data is there. This is not opinion. This is science. And so there is an affordable way to build that eliminates the toxic exposures and is more energy efficient, which is better on our infrastructure, better on our planet, and less of a carbon footprint. And it takes less workers, and it's doable right now. There have been enough people who have been working in this for a number of years that have brought it to a validation point. Now we just need the right people to invest that say, look, I believe it enough to invest the right number of dollars into it to get a certain number of sustainable communities, and not do it in a way that some of these other current 3D build systems are doing it. They're building cheaper, faster, and better, and they're charging more for this new build technology because they're making more money. They're not in it for, I'm not saying everyone, and I won't name companies, but they're not necessarily in it for the humanitarian effort and to ease the pain and suffering on the current human condition. They're in it to make bit more money. And, you do it at a third of the cost. So you're already in over all your competitors. If you did it in a way that helps your competitors also roll out these build systems and teach them and educate them, because we need more communities like this. Again, we just get one company, build a city that's the prototype city, like a little garden community, faster, cheaper, less toxic, less of a carbon footprint, more energy efficient, and it just becomes the validation. That should become the new regulation.
Is this what West Eden is all about?
That is what West Eden is all about. We kind of have a parent company that's kind of, we have this dream of West Eden. It's the heaven on earth, right? We are the hands and feet to usher that in, and we can be building that. And it's got to start in our homes. So when we educate people on the toxic exposure in their homes, we give them access to be able to change it. We educate current companies on the reason and the affordability that they can change it, and create a demand there, not a protest, kind of a peaceful protest. Look, we want to keep buying from our favorite company, but we want our favorite company, and we want those people to change it because they're already reaching the masses. They already have the infrastructure or the teams and the facilities to reach the most people. Yeah. If they change it, we've done something better than having to create it from scratch. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. But if I have to, like we're doing now, create a company and an organization and a team of like-minded people around building housing that's affordable, accessible, non-toxic, and less of a carbon footprint and more energy efficient, we've answered so many current crises with one thing. And if I have to do that to bring the demand and to validate why and how to do it like this, I'm okay with that. Then that's where Coddle Creek Capital is not just about, the sciences of genetics and things like that. It's also around the sciences of the biology and our exposures. And that's where, I'm like community outreach and how to make these things accessible and affordable in all of our communities to everyone, all the way down to the people who find themselves without shelter or that are incarcerated. They should still have the availability and accessibility to these healthy things, because we should be restoring these people and educating them further on how to do it when they get their housing back or their life back.
But community development, is one of the most important factors. If there's no demand for these products, there's no demand for these services, no demand for these trends, they're not going to happen.
Right.
This is still a capitalist model.
Yeah.
If it doesn't sell, it doesn't sell.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you communicate? Many people would say, we've been lied to for decades about many of these things that we've talked about today. How do you tell folks that, guess what? You've been lied to, but there are answers.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah. I think first we remove the fear of the being lied to, because I do in many cases, because we get down to it. In many cases, we've been lied to, flat out lied to. But I think in many cases, there's a misinformation at the top levels, or unawareness, or lack of exposure to certain data, because they're busy doing other things. And so if we call it being lied to, misinformed, misguided, misdirected, all those things, and then we educate those people. Again, rolling out these companies are a validation in themselves. I can tell people all day long, and some people they look with skepticism, like, really, do you think that's possible? Is really that would take tens of
yes,
decades or generations long to actually see the benefit of that, and that's not true. 12 to 36 months in a schoolroom cafeteria, in a cafeteria in the schools, we can start having a measurable enough outcome that the data speaks for itself. But again, with these communities, as we build these communities and really, become our own prototype, there's nothing else we need to do except come visit the community or measure, look at the socioeconomic impact of the people living in these communities, or the health of these people living in these communities. And it becomes its own validation. At that point, we just point to the direction of what we've built, or the clothing that we're creating, or, the data that validates why we're doing what we're doing. We show people how to do it. We bring the demand to it, and that brings the cost down. And then more companies will start to switch, because I do believe that people have big hearts. And I do believe even the companies that are of the worst things, that are exposing our kids and our people at the worst levels, if we said, look, use your same technology to transfer something good to their body, we could change the world. And so I think everything could be changed to something good if they were educated and informed proper.
So coming full circle, RFK Jr.
Yeah.
He's got 2 years, 4 years, Lord knows how long. Can he make an impact?
Absolutely. I think he's already made such a significant impact, and I think he's so bold with the way he's doing it. When he came up running for president, and I could see some of the things he was advocating for, I was so excited. And I immediately started praying and asking people to pray for protection for him and for his family.
Yes.
Because, if he were faced with crisis with his family, and then his attention goes to other places, we do need his attention and like-minded people on things like this. And we need to bring their attention to the resolution and the teams that are already in place at places like the North Carolina Research Campus, and science teams who have been working on these things for decades. Or Norm, for 40 years, was working on these things to, eliminate autism and Alzheimer's and all these autoimmune things that Western medicine doesn't know what to do with. Just things like changing our water and the molecular state, the excited nature of our water. There's science enough around that the water that children are exposed to can help a child who's autistic. And there are studies that have already been done and that we should expand on. So RFK Jr. has a short period of time to make a massive impact. And 2 years is enough time. You don't even need a big team. You just need the right team and the right advisors in the right areas to show him and tell him where the resolution is and how accessible it is right now with the technology that we already have.
Well, I got to tell you, this has been fun.
It's been exciting. I love it.
I'm glad we recorded it because I need to go back and take notes.
I love it. I love it.
I learned a lot more than I thought I would.
Awesome.
I should have known.
It's always fun. Our talks go for hours.
Sitting down with someone like you, it is transformative.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it very much.
I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And as you suggested, we all need the power of prayer.
Yeah.
When we have the opportunity, we should always take the opportunity.
And to realize it's not religious. You don't have to be religious.
Right.
Pray, and ask for the answers, and you will be guided.
Yeah.
Just listen, have eyes to see and ears to hear, and the answers are everywhere.
And we should all pray for RFK Jr.
We should all pray for, because it will change the trajectory of the current crisis and ongoing growing crisis. He can certainly make a massive impact that will carry on for generations to come.
Yes. Well, on behalf of the Unboxing the Office podcast, thank you. On behalf of our sponsors, Coddle Creek Capital and HOTLOGIC, thank you. This has been an awesome premiere episode. Stay tuned for the next episode in the coming weeks. I don't know if it'll be as good as this one, but we can always aspire.
It'll be just as exciting.
Yes.